Hey, it's Nick at Table19 Media, and in this video, I'm going to show you 5 tips that you can use right now to take better video on your phone. Let's go. Okay, first let's get one thing straight. You do not need the latest smartphone to take good video. These 5 tips are more about addressing settings and what environment you're shooting in. So even if your phone has been made in the last several years, most likely your phone will have all of these settings, most if not all of these settings that we're going to be talking about in this video. Also, I will be showing you on my iPhone 11 Pro Max, but just because you do not have an iPhone doesn't mean you can't follow along and use these tips to shoot on your own smartphone. Make sense? All right, let's go. Tip number 1 is to shoot at the max resolution your video can handle. I recommend shooting at the max resolution because 1, you will have the biggest file, the biggest resolution video you can have with your phone so that when it comes to editing, you have more space to work with. I say this for a couple of reasons. 1 being that you want to have the highest quality video to start with. No matter what you're going to be doing with it, you want to make sure that you have the highest quality video. Even if you're just going to show it straight from your phone, you want to make sure that you have the best quality you can have with your phone in that video. Now, when it comes to editing later on, you want to have the most real estate in the video to work with. Even if you're going to be editing that video down to a lower resolution file, the final output maybe 1080, and you're shooting, you shot your video at 4K. That's still good to have because 1, you can either zoom in to frame the shot differently than you originally shot it, or 4K video seems to look a little bit sharper even when it's downscaled to 1080. But ultimately, shooting at the highest resolution possible is a good idea. Whether it's 4K, 2K, or even 1080, you want to make sure that the video you're shooting is the highest quality it can be. Tip number 2 is to lock the exposure. Now, I'm sure you've seen lots of other videos where as you move the camera around, it will get brighter and or darker depending on where you're moving it. If you're moving it towards the sun, the image may get darker. If you move it away into a darker area, it'll get lighter. And that's just because the camera is trying to adjust to give you the best lighting for that situation. But that looks very amateurish and just doesn't look professional, and it can also be a little bit distracting. So tip number 2 is about locking the exposure on your camera so that as you move it around, it's not going to be adjusting up and down and just being uncontrollable. This way you can control what the lighting in the video looks like. So we're going to go into your default camera app. Now I'm using the iOS camera app, default camera app. And as you move it around, you'll see that it adjusts. So what you can do is tap on your screen in the area that you want to expose for, so that you get a good. You may need to do this a couple times just to find a good lighting. But you're going to tap on the screen, and so you're going to tap and then hold for a couple seconds, and you'll see at the top it'll say AEAF lock, which means now the exposure and the focus are locked. So as you move it around, the exposure is not going to be adjusting to what the lighting situation is. So once you've locked that, you can see that there is a sun icon and a little toggle underneath that. So you can slide that up and down and adjust it manually as you see fit before you shoot your video. Make sure that that's the way you want it to be. The exposure is at the right level. And so then as you're recording, it's not going to be adjusting all over the place. So ultimately that looks a lot more professional, a lot less distracting, a lot less amateurish. I think you'll definitely see the difference when you lock that exposure. Tip number 3 is about choosing the right frame rate. Now, most smartphones today can shoot 3, even 4 different frame rates. So let's go over what the different frame rates are about. So there's 24, 30, and 60. Some phones will go to 120 for a specific slow motion video function, or even 240, but usually it's 24, 30, and 60. First is 24 frames per second. Now this is my favorite frame rate to shoot with because it really it has more of a cinematic look, and also it has that cinematic motion blur that we're used to seeing in movie theaters. And all around, it just looks better to me. 30 frames per second is more of a standard TV look, where you think of watching the news, where it's less motion blur, definitely more home movie looking. Not a big fan of it. I don't usually shoot in 30 frames per second, but again, if it's not a big deal to you, that's just something to understand. Now, 60 frames per second, again, is more, well, it's actually double the frame rate of 30, but 60 frames per second definitely looks sharper as far as the movements, where there's really no motion blur at all. You know, it kind of comes down to personal preference, you know, what you like, but usually 60 frames per second is used specifically if you want to slow down the footage a little bit so that it's still smooth and not, you know, not jerky. You know, if you slow it down, you could easily slow it down to, you know, half the speed, and it'll still look nice and fluid, nice and smooth. But I don't necessarily recommend shooting in 60 frames per second if you're just going to play it back at normal speed. But I will shoot at 60 frames per second if I know, hey, this will be a good shot. If I have the ability, if I want to later on to slow down the footage to, you know, half speed. Even if I'm editing in a timeline that is 24 frames a second, shooting 60 frames per second video is a good idea for some sort of shot that I think will look cool if I slow it down. So those are the three main frame rates. You need to obviously shoot the best one that's going to work for you. I definitely recommend, if it's just, you know, family videos, you know, out and about, to shoot at 24 frames a second. But if you're in a situation where you know, where there's maybe a lot of fast moving movement, you know, action in the shot, maybe shooting at 60 frames per second is a good idea, just so you have the ability to slow it down if in editing later on. But I would recommend testing, you know, going and shooting with all three different frame rates to see which one you like more. You may like 30 frames per second more, or 60 frames per second more, but just go out and shoot a couple of different videos with those different frame rates to see which one you like more, and go ahead and use that one. Tip number 4 is having good lighting. Now, depending on the situation we're shooting in, we cannot always control the light. If you're at a basketball game or a company, company meeting or something like that, you're not going to be able to control the lighting. But it's something to definitely have in the back of your mind if you're shooting the family at the beach, to make sure that maybe, you know, they're facing away from the sun, so that they can be backlit, and then you can expose the video, you know, for their faces so they're not in the shadows. But it's something to keep in mind while you're shooting video. Now, during the different times of day are something to keep in mind as well, because that can affect how shadows fall on people's faces. Where if you go out at noon, a lot of times shadows will be coming straight down, and you get, you know, the raccoon eyes around the eye sockets and stuff. I would recommend that if it's possible, you know, go out, you know, later in the evening or earlier in the morning, so that the shadows aren't so, you know, straight down. But also, you know, if you can go more towards sunset, towards that golden hour, which is about an hour, you know, before sunset, so that the light is not as harsh, the shadows are not as harsh, and you actually get a nice color with the sun going down. I definitely recommend, if you're going out to take video of the family playing at the park or something, if it's possible to go a little bit later in the day, so that you have better lighting for that situation. That's something to definitely keep in mind and just be aware of, so that your videos look more professional. Now, obviously, you want to make sure that the lighting where you're at is not obviously like blinding the person where they have to squint, but also you don't want them to be completely in shadow. And it may be good to use the 2/3 rule, as far as, you know, being able to light someone's face So where half of the, half of their face, or sorry, not half, but 2/3 of their face are in the light, and then the other third is maybe a little bit darker in the shadow. That just looks that has more of a stylized look. So obviously, so if you're in a situation where you can kind of like maybe turn them a little bit so that you can you have more of that stylized lighting for their face, that's something to definitely keep in mind. But really, lighting can make so much of a difference in your videos. Now obviously, home videos, if you're just at home and your kids are running around and you want to shoot video, that's not going to be a factor. But if you're out and about, and you can at least position people in a certain direction so that they're well lit, that's definitely something to keep in mind and just pay attention to. And in the situations where you can maybe change it a little bit, go for it, and see, and you will see how much better your videos look with keeping the lighting situation in mind. The fifth and final tip for taking better video with your phone is to use a gimbal to stabilize your footage. Now, when I'm out and about, I will use the DJI Osmo Mobile 3. They have an Osmo Mobile 2, which is very good as well. But this, using this with your phone will help to stabilize your footage a lot better, so that you're not having walking and your video looks shaky just because you're walking and you can't keep it steady. So using a gimbal, they're very cheap. This one is I think $130. You can probably get them a little bit cheaper, or the earlier version of this for even cheaper. But it's such a simple tool that's easy to this is pretty easy to just fold up. And to have, and just even in your pocket or your purse or your backpack, super easy to travel with. So I would definitely recommend getting a gimbal and using it as often as you can for your video. It's going to look so much better, so much more professional. It's going to add so much production value, if you will, to your videos. I shot a sample earlier today when I was down at the beach shooting with the gimbal, and then without the gimbal, and you can see the difference it makes. If you know you're going to be shooting lots of video on your phone, getting a 3-axis gimbal for your smartphone is definitely worth the investment. It's super easy to use, super easy to learn how to use, and you will definitely see that your videos look so much better when they've been stabilized and they're not shaky, you trying to hold your phone. Whether you're shooting video of yourself walking, or if you're shooting video of your family members out and about, having your phone on a gimbal will make the footage look so much better. All right, those are my 5 tips for shooting better video with your phone. If you have any tips that you think I missed or didn't quite talk about or didn't cover, make sure you let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you found it helpful, please make sure you like it and hit subscribe. I'll have more videos like this coming out in the future. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.